Hello friends, it's your boy Trant, and today I am here for my next draft analysis for the UNPL Spring Fling. So we are just finishing up with JJDL as well as BBR, and we are ready to head into our next big Wi-Fi league. So we have the UNPL Spring Fling, and just a little bit about what this league is. So I've played in UNPL for 2 seasons now, so this is going to be my 3rd draft with them. This one is going to be a little bit smaller of one. It's not like an actual regular season thing, but it is a low tier draft, and there are quite a few divisions. There's a lot of big names in this community, in the Wi-Fi community, and then we also have some people that are getting their feet wet with the Wi-Fi community, and so I very much look forward to playing some of these people. But yeah, right before we get into it, I just want to say a big thank you to Danny Mac as well as Dapper and the rest of the commissioners and the crew for getting this together. It was a lot of fun, and low tier is my favorite format to play, so I was very excited to be able to get a draft together for this. And yeah, let's go ahead and get right into the team. So getting into this draft, I really wanted to start by just picking something that I felt comfortable with, and kind of play to my strengths. I've played a lot of low tier, and I wasn't sure exactly how much experience some of the other people I'd be playing against had, and so I wanted to use that to my advantage. So the divisions were split into groups of 8, so there were only 8 people drafting for each pool, and I was pick 8 out of 8, so I had the last pick, and then I got the first pick in round 2. And I originally did pick Entei here, but I saw a mon that I thought was almost as good, if not better than Entei, at a cheaper price, so I ended up dropping Entei and Grace, and I decided to pick up Skeledirge. So Skeledirge is technically my first round pick. Now Skeledirge is a monster. I don't see this thing in low tier too often. A lot of people do ban it. I definitely think it's on like that verge of being bannable. Skeledirge is a very good Pokemon. It's got a very good defensive typing. It resists a lot of good offensive typings, and it has 2 immunities with normal and fighting. It's immune to burn, and just giving it boots makes it very hard to kill with Slack Off plus Will-O-Wisp. It has a lot of ramp up potential with Torch Song plus potential Willow Hex sets. This mon's very versatile, but also just very consistent. Skeledirge is one of those Pokemon that it's almost just impossible to find a bad matchup for it. You can almost always, like bring it and it will do something. And so Skeledirge was a Pokemon I've used plenty before, and I was very comfortable taking it. So yeah, that's what we decided to go with. Alright, so on the way back, we decided to pick up Wo-Chien, and the reason for this is Wo-Chien is going to be our Terra captain. So the rules for Terra in this league is it is open Terra with Terra preview, which means that we can pick any Terra type we want. We just have to disclose that information to our partner before our game starts. But we do not have to tell them during prep, so we can absolutely kind of catch them off guard with whatever type we want. And Wo-Chien, being cheap enough to Terra in this league, I thought was definitely a tiering mistake. I think this Pokemon is far too valuable in low tier alone to be as low as it was, and then to add Terra on top of it. I think this Pokemon is going to be disgusting. It's already a very strong defensive Pokemon, with its only weakness really being its typing, and so being able to get rid of that and having things like base 70 speed, taunt, and leech seed subsets, you get knockoff, you get ruination. Giga Drains are very strong because it has good stats. Overall, there's really not a lot to knock on this Pokemon. It's got amazing stats offensively and defensively, and it's got a good speed tier for it to be a bulky stall Pokemon. And being able to run Spadef sets with its ability lowering the opponent's attack just absolutely makes this thing so hard to kill. And so adding Terra to it just made it a no-brainer. I love Wo-Chien, and I think this Pokemon's going to be one of our MVPs this season. Next up, we decided to take what a lot of people think is one of the best Pokemon in low tier. We decided to pick up Blastoise. Blastoise is another Pokemon that I think was just a little too cheap for what it's actually worth. So I thought it was a no-brainer that I'd pick it up on the way back. And so Blastoise gets Shell Smash, so it has a lot of potential to sweep if the other team doesn't have good things like Water Resist and Ice Resist. It has a lot of potential to just be a bulky Stallmon with things like lefty sets or even rest sets. And we also get Rapid Spin. Getting removal in low tier is already very difficult, and we just made it even more difficult for other people by taking arguably the best spinner in the format. So no complaints there. And Blastoise, like I said, just a very strong Pokemon. There's not a lot of threats that can absolutely just OHKO this Pokemon without being set up. And Blastoise just being an overall tank is going to be very good for our team, and it's a very good pairing with Wo-Chien. Getting access to Flip Turn, plus Rapid Spin, it gets a lot of support moves like Haze, it gets Roar and Yawn, as well as having that sweeping potential with things like Shell Smash and Water Spout and Wave Crash. So next up, going back to what I was talking about with Blastoise about not getting a lot of removal, we decided to go ahead and pick up another quote-unquote form of removal. We got Hatterene, which is going to just deter our opponent from bringing hazards. Hatterene is a very strong Pokemon. Its offensive stats are just insane. It hits hard naturally when you can run just complete defensive sets, and it still is hitting like a truck. Being able to set up itself with things like Calm Mind and Trick Room Baton Pass into some of our other Pokemon or sets that you might be able to see, and it gets really good coverage, especially with different utility moves like Nuzzle. It gets Baton Pass, it gets Mystical Fire to keep from being swept by certain special attackers. And yeah, Magic Bounce is just very good in low tier where a lot of people aren't running a lot of removal. So being able to have that on my side to where I can run my own hazards and not have to worry about Magic Bounce being bounced back to me, I think is very strong. And having a good Fairy type in low tier is always a good idea for those very strong fighting types that are running around in low tier. So with our fifth pick, we decided to pick up yet another Pokemon that I think was tiered just a little bit too low. We decided to pick up Clodsire. Clodsire is a very strong Pokemon in regular formats, and so in low tier, it's even harder to kill. It's got amazing defenses with an even decent attack stat. It's obviously very slow. But paired with Hatterene, we could do potential Trick Room sets. We get a lot of hazard stack with this. Paired with Hatterene is a very good idea. Clodsire is a very annoying Pokemon to kill. We get Water Absorb for potential water types. If we ever run into like a Rain Team or a Floatzel or anything like that, Clodsire is here. We have things like Curse sets. We get Body Press. Having access to Toxic and low tier and Paldea deck specifically is always really nice. And then having access to Unaware, so that way we are not prone to setup, is also very strong. And I think this Pokemon paired with the other Unaware Pokemon Skeledirge, as well as Leech Seed, Wo-Chien, and then Flip Turn on Blastoise, this team is starting off very strong, very bulky, but also very solid, and we're synergizing very well. So next up, we're starting to get into the offense side of things. Obviously, a lot of the Pokemon we've drafted are pretty bulky. Some of them are bulky offense, some of them are a little bit just more on the bulky, the tank side. But there was a lot of offense to offer in the lower tiers, so we decided to go ahead and start getting some of that. We have Duraludon here, who's another bulky offense Pokemon. Getting access to Eviolite in this generation is absolutely crazy. Dragon Steel type in this format is very strong, only being weak to 2 types, and having both of those types be checked by some of our other Pokemon is very nice. We have plenty of checks to fighting with things like Skeledirge and Hatterene, and then between Blastoise and Wo-Chien, especially Wo-Chien with Terra, we can handle ground types very well. Duraludon has a very strong natural special attack stat, and giving it access to things like Rocks and Steel Beam are also really nice. That way we get more utility out of them on, and overall just a very solid piece to add into our bulky offense next to everything else. So going into our next pick, we decided to take a very hard left turn from what we were building. We decided to pick up Politoed. So when you play low tier, a lot of times weather is banned just because weather is a very strong mechanic in regular drafts, and so in low tier a lot of times people do ban it just because it is so strong. But Politoed was very cheap and was allowed Drizzle, and I thought this was a no-brainer of a pick. Politoed itself is actually very strong. It gets a lot of good coverage, and it gets utility with things like Perish Trap. Scarf sets with Weather Ball hit very hard. And then being able to set up the rain for our other Pokemon, things like Blastoise, who gets Rain Dish can help it be a little bit more of a bulky Pokemon. And then also baiting other water types into coming into our water absorbed Clodsire is also very nice. And it also helps Wo-Chien with the fire weakness as well. So overall, very solid Pokemon, and I'm very excited to use it in low tier. And it pairs very well with our next Pokemon. Alright, so going into our next pick, like I said, we decided to take a very hard left turn. So pairing with Politoed, we have Basculin. Now, Basculin is a very strong Pokemon in this format. It also is one of our Terra Captains. So Basculin, being a Terra Captain with the abilities that it gets, is going to be very strong. Because Basculin gets access to very strong abilities to pair with Terra. We get Rockhead and Reckless. So with Basculin Red Stripe, we get Reckless, which makes any move that has extra or that has recoil damage, it makes those do more damage. We get Rockhead with Blue Stripe that allows us to not take any recoil damage, so Terra Water Wave crashes in the rain. And then with White Stripe, we get Rattled, which can be very niche into certain Pokemon, to where we can get a +1 speed boost if we're ever intimidated or hit by a Bug, Dark, or Ghost type move. But we also get access to Adaptability and Mold Breaker. So Mold Breaker, being able to ignore things like Storm Drain or Water Absorb on certain Pokemon, is very strong. And then Adaptability, if we ever don't want to Terra or we want to Terra it into something else, that Adaptability, getting it a ×2 boost instead of a 1.5 with Stab, is also very strong. Now obviously Adaptability with Terra does not stack, but Adaptability with a Terra that is not Water means that both types will get that boost. And this is just a very strong Pokemon. It's got a good speed tier at 98. We'll be running Scarf or Band a lot. Terra Water Wave crashes, we get Flip Turn, we get Aqua Jet, both very strong utility moves. Psychic Fangs is very good in low tier because people do run screens to allow for setup. And I just think this Pokemon is going to be very strong and very underratedly good for us. Moving into our next pick, I noticed that we really needed some speed. We were lacking in the speed department, our fastest Pokemon being that Basculin at 98, so we decided to go ahead and pick up one of the fastest Pokemon in the format. We got Jolteon, who I think was also very underpriced. Jolteon's sitting at a measly, I believe, 7 points. So just 1 point higher than the Terra limit, which is just a little unfortunate. But Jolteon, very strong Pokemon. This is low tier, so a lot of people do neglect to draft certain types because the pool is so minuscule. So a lot of people do neglect drafting things like ground types, and if we ever see that, we will take complete advantage with Jolteon, being able to just spam Volt Switches. Pairing it with Rain means we get 100% accurate Thunders. We get Weather Ball for Water Stab into those ground types, which is also very nice. And just adding more Volt Turn to the core we have with Baton Pass, Hatterene, and then double Flip Turn with Basculin and Blastoise was also really nice. So going into our next pick, I was kind of looking around and seeing what Pokemon were left on the board that I thought filled certain roles on my team, but also were not too expensive. And so I was looking for some Pokemon that I thought were also tiered a little low. And we decided to pick up Hariyama. So Hariyama, very, very bulky Pokemon, very hard to kill in regular formats. So being in low tier and not having access to all these high tier fairies and psychic types running around, very strong. It's going to be very hard to kill. Unfortunately, once again, 1.2 high for Terra. But he is a force to be reckoned with. He has very good natural bulk as well as a very strong attack stat at 120. With 3 very good abilities based on what we need that week. We get Guts if we ever run into a potential T-Spike stack team or Will-O-Wisp spam. We get Thick Fat for Fire and Ice type Pokemon. Then we also get Sheer Force to boost our damage like relentlessly. And yeah, Hariyama is just going to be a very big glue Pokemon. I think this is another Pokemon like Skeledirge where you can just add it to basically any team and it's going to put in work. Then last but not least, another Pokemon we picked up in Grace. I was targeting this Pokemon from the very beginning, but unfortunately when I picked up Hariyama, I could not afford it, and I did think Hariyama was going to get taken, so I decided to take Hariyama and hope that Tauros was going to last till Grace, which it did. Tauros is a very strong Pokemon. It gives us a good speed tier at 110. It kind of narrows that gap between Basculin and Jolteon. Base 110 is very good in low tier because there's not very many Pokemon that are actually good that are above that 110 speed tier. Tauros getting access to 2 very good abilities in Intimidate and Sheer Force. Anger Point is not bad as well, but we will probably most likely not be running that. But getting access to those 2 abilities with decent bulk on the defensive and the special defensive side lets Intimidate actually be very useful for us, as well as fast Life Orb Sheer Force sets as well. It gets a lot of coverage. It gets almost all the coverage you could think of. And this Pokemon is just going to be very strong. It's going to be a huge breaker, as well as getting Raging Bull for any potential screens teams. And yeah, this Pokemon was just a very good glue piece right next to Hariyama. I think it adds a lot of needed physical offense, because aside from the Basculin and the Hariyama, our team is very primarily special. But Tauros definitely adds to that and evens it out a little bit more. So yeah, that's going to be my team. If you guys like it or you don't like it, feel free to let me know down in the comments. I think this team is very strong, and I'm very excited to get to build with it. I was looking through the teams, and I don't think there's a lot of people that are going to match up well into me. I like the semi-range, so that way we're not relying on it. But if we do bring the Politoed Basculin, people are going to have to be prepared for it. Very strong team, and I'm very much looking forward to taking home a potential championship. So yeah, that's going to be it for me. If you guys like the team, go ahead and let me know down in the comments, and I will see you guys for my week 1 battle. Peace.